Welcome to Charter Local Edition. Today our crew is covering the 2017 Nevada legislative session. I'm your host, Anna Cowley, and my guest is Republican Assemblyman Chris.Edwards. Thank you for being here.
Great to see you.
Chris, your priority for coming to this session is to take care of your constituents. Tell us what you've been able to do for them so far.
Well, you know, we've had some accomplishments even from the minority position, and a lot of it has been defending against a lot of the unproductive legislation that the Democrats were pushing forward. We are still working on protecting the seniors with guardianship rules that will help prevent them from being mistreated by the guardians who are dishonest. We're protecting their property tax caps because I know that's important to folks who are on fixed incomes. We're also looking after the veterans, trying to make sure that they have educational benefits so that they can get their life on track for the next 50, 60 years, and also any of their needs that come up throughout the entire process. So that's some of it. We're looking at the businesses. I put forth legislation that would review the cost of businesses and try to reduce the license fees and other kind of costs that are involved in just working here in Nevada.
Well, that kind of goes hand in hand with some of the things happening with the Trump administration on the federal level to just try to roll back some of the costs, roll back some of the overlay of regulation that's can be very crushing, especially to a young business.
Right, and you know, there have been a lot of businesses that have struggled to get through the recession, and they really, I don't think, got as much help as they should have. So the fact that they've survived this long, I thought that we ought to come up here and find ways to help them to not just survive, but actually thrive as the economy begins to grow.
So you're very interested in growing the economy, growing jobs, but that's always just such a challenge when it comes down to the grassroots where the rubber meets the road of how do you actually do it? So what are your thoughts along those lines?
Well, you know, a lot of the time it's just a matter of making sure you don't put in rules that are going to stagnate growth. It's also a matter of not taxing things too much so that they actually have the money to invest in themselves and grow their company. And then sometimes it's just a matter of stepping back and letting the companies do what they're supposed to do and not interfere with them. I think that helps the companies out a lot.
So for what you'd like to do before the session ends and you still have a little time to work, tell me what your priorities are and where you're going to put your emphasis with the time you have left.
Well, again, we're going to be fighting for the issues that are of concern for my constituents. Job growth is one, education reforms are another. In the last session, we did some great educational reforms, and unfortunately, the other party is trying to undo a lot of them. So we find ourselves fighting to make sure that we keep the reforms, especially the ones that have proven to be working. Right. And you know, my constituents know that there's so much wrong that goes on in the education system here that when you find things that work, you got to defend them, work them, and make sure that they survive. Those would be some of them. It's also going to be protecting the seniors, looking after the veterans as well, and I'm sure there's about 5 other things that I'd like to do. And they'll probably come to mind in a couple minutes.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about education. Last session, there was a nice bump in taxes with that money going toward education, and money goes a long way when it comes to educating our kids. And so when you're wanting to protect the things that were put in place last year, very specifically, what would you like to see maintained?
One of the best pieces of legislation we put in was the reorganization of the school district. The school district down in Clark County is simply too huge. So this was a way to kind of break it up, empower the local schools so that they could operate more efficiently and more effectively. In my case, I've got schools up in Mesquite and Moapa, which are 80 and 90 miles away from Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's a long way.
Yeah, Las Vegas doesn't really understand what's going on up there. So giving them the autonomy to do things, giving them the budgets to do it, will help them to produce a better education for the kids up in that section. There's also the ESAs, the Education Savings Accounts. Mm-hmm. We started that process, and unfortunately we had a legal challenge, but now we figured out what we need to do. So we're going to absolutely fight, you know, that will be the hill to die for. And I always say it's actually the hill that we kill others for if we don't get to the top. But that is so crucial to so many of my constituents. My next door neighbor was, asking me, what's the status of this? How's it working? And I'm like, we are going to get this done. And we have the commitment from the governor to help us to make sure it does happen. Those are some of the important ones, but there's also like the Silver State Opportunity Grants, which help kids to get up to a 15 credit hour semester so that they can graduate and graduate on time. that system
Always
proved-
helpful.
Exactly, yeah, because then they get into the workforce and they start their lives, they start their families, and they become productive members of the society. Well, there are some people who think that it should be for everyone, but not everyone can do 15 credit hours a semester. But for those who will make that extra effort, we gave them the means to do it. And the results were fantastic. And she came up and said that you have a 200% increase in the number of people who graduate on time if they can get to 15 credit hours.
Oh, that's a good metrics.
That's a very good one.
Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time with all you're working on to come and talk with us, and we appreciate you watching us. This is Assemblyman Chris Edwards. I'm Dana Cowley, and this is Charter Local Edition in Nevada.